Hi there guys, welcome back to my studio. My name's Conor and I am a wildlife artist that specialises in both graphite and scratchboard. So welcome into the second video in this fur masterclass where we're going to be looking at how to create this tiger's muzzle. So in part one we looked at how to create the actual nose texture itself, which in itself wasn't fur but it's quite integral to how we create this tiger's muzzle. So this section is going to be looking more at the fur, so we're going to be looking at how to create the bridge of the nose and sort of extending a little bit more onto the sides of this nose. So I hope you guys enjoy it and let's get started. Right then guys, so we're going to start getting to work on this sort of muzzly short fur texture. So I'm going to start really with the bridge of the nose because this texture and the fur here is quite confusing, so I thought it'd be a good one to just show you. Now I'm just going to put a bit of glassine paper just on the right side just so that I can rest my hand without sort of smudging all my outline. So like I say, mainly what we're going to cover is this sort of bridge of the nose area. Now this is going to be a mix between sort of a live voiceover and also some time-lapse footage, just because this area is going to take a good couple of hours to complete. So this area, I think, well, I've always struggled with. It's always been a bit of a daunting area just because the fur comes and sort of bends round and flows in a lot of different directions. So you can see on my line art I've put these little lines, and this is to help me with the direction that the fur's going. So we already made a little bit of a start on the fur texture just down here, but this was just so that we could sort of get a feel of what the nose was going to look like. So we're going to work from the bottom and sort of start working our way up now. So you'll see that I've got little letters as well, like a B there and a G there. This again is just to help me with the different areas of tone that I want to make sure I don't sort of get in the wrong place. So this stands for black and this G just stands for grey, and it just tells me that there's an area of slightly more darker fur in this area that I just want to make sure I watch out for. So we're going to start probably just on this side. I'm just having a look at my reference photo because the reference photo is going to be very, very important here because that's what we're going to use, well, obviously to just show us where the fur's going. Now I've angled another line just above, just so that I hope you can see these indenting marks that I'm making. I've put a couple of test ones just there. And as well as these fur strokes being, or the sort of line art fur strokes, these ones, as well as being directional, they're also there to guide me on how long the fur is in these areas. So obviously the ones down here are longer than the ones up here. So when I'm indenting, I'm in essence just doing the light fur strokes. And I'm just using this indenting tool like I would a pencil, like if I was just drawing these. So I'm just doing normal sort of fur strokes. Now when it comes to indenting tools, you can use a lot of different ones. So this is just one that's got different ends on it. So there's a bigger, larger end on that side. There's also another end on this side. And you can also change these out for different sizes depending on the artworks that you're working on. But depending on the piece and depending on the size and also the fur texture that I'm looking for, I'll use a variety of different ones. I also use a blunted dart. So that's just like a normal dart that they use in sports, and I've just blunted and filed down the end of that. I know a few other people use things like a ballpoint pen that's ran out of ink. Just make sure it has definitely run out of ink before you use that. Okay. So I generally try and work on a smallish area at a time because I don't want to get overwhelmed. So the fur in this middle section isn't too complicated. It pretty much comes, if you're looking at the reference photo, it comes straight down, and then just at the end it sort of starts to curve round and out. But when we get over this side here, it's a little bit more complicated. And every time I'm laying down these fur strokes, I'm sort of trying to cross them over. So I don't want them to be uniformly straight. There's sort of, so if I do some over this side, you'll be able to see. So if I just, they're almost like that. So they're curved and coming out. And what we want to do is we want to work on a small area and then go over that area with some graphite to make sure that we're happy with how things are. And also so that we're not getting lost. So obviously, like I say, I've got this darker area down here, so I don't want to lose these graphite lines that I've put in. So when we're looking at what tools or what pencil we're going to use now, I tend to use, depending on the area that we're working on, a variation between my Caran pencils, which are just like your normal wooden cased pencils, and I also use my clutch pencils, which have a sharper lead on them. Now I try and keep the wooden case pencils blunt, or blunter than the other ones, because I want to have the, when I sort of put these marks down now, the idea is that they're going to glide over the top of those indented marks that we've put down. And again, the technique I'm doing here is just like a fur texture. So I'm just laying down fur marks. And what we tend to do is leave those areas that are white. You can just see them poking through here, and the graphite that you're putting down is almost acting like the shadow underneath or in between the furs. I'm just going to start working a little bit more across here, and I'm going to try and get this sort of area done, because there's an area just in the middle that you'll see that's a little bit darker, and that's what I want to make sure that we don't lose. So I'm just going to move this bit of paper over. Now this is just glassine paper, there's nothing sort of special about this. You can also use tracing paper if you wanted to. And it's just stopping me from leaning too much on the paper itself, because I don't want to, like I say, lift that graphite off and get graphite on my hand and then smudge it onto the page. Now when we're looking at fur, I tend to look at 3 key things to try and get realistic fur. So one is something we've already talked about, which is the length of fur. So for me, I'll talk about this a lot because I think it is really important. If you do, or if you're aiming for realistic artwork, then you need to make sure that the fur length is the right length for that area. So on the bridge of the nose here, the fur is incredibly short and almost stubbly. So if we were in this area and we were to put down really, really long fur strokes, it would look a little bit odd. And the same would go for if, let's say, we were doing a lion's mane and we were putting really, really short fur strokes down, then again, that would look a little bit odd for that area. So fur length is a very, very important thing for these sorts of areas. And the second thing is fur direction. So again, if, let's say in this area, we know we're working with the fur going down and then it swoops out at the edges or at the ends. If, let's say, we decided to start doing fur strokes coming across, again, it's going to give an odd looking appearance to the area that you're working on, because it's going to make the form of this tiger's muzzle a little bit odd. And then the third thing is the tone of the fur. So if we were to do an area too light or too dark, again, that's just going to look a little bit odd. So if you think of it in regards to a tiger stripe, if you were to do a black stripe white or a white stripe black, it's just going to look, it's not going to look natural. It's going to look, again, a little bit odd. So they're the three things I'm always sort of thinking about when I'm doing this technique or when I'm doing fur. Now, it feels like when you're doing this technique, it does feel like it's going to take a long time. And it is, because you're in essence, you're drawing in each individual hair strand. But then when you go over the top, it tends to come together a little bit quicker, or more quicker than actually putting in the marks themselves. Now, I'm not aiming for a perfect replica of this drawing. I'm just looking, as long as for me it looks like a tiger's muzzle, I'm happy with that. Obviously that's going to be a little bit different if you're working with pet portraits. You're going to want to try and get things in the pretty much the exact location that you want them to. But when you when I'm working on something like this, like a tiger, if this tiger was to move and look a different way, then his fur would be in slightly a different position. So as long as I've got the generic tones and values and direction in the right place, I'm happy with this. Because like I say, even if it was a different tiger, it's going to look a little bit different. So down this centre line, you can just see on the reference photo, we've just got this shorter, stubbly type of fur, and it's just a little bit darker, whereas we've got a little bit more lightness around the edges. Now I'm making sure I'm using the flat end of my pencil. So you can see I've got a bit of a sharper end just on the point there, and a flat end. Now I'm just using the flat end because I want it to just gently glide over those indenting marks. I don't want it to go into those indenting marks just yet. Now obviously this is only the first layer of graphite, so we're going to be doing a lot more layers. And if you think, let's say for example here, you want this area to be a little bit lighter, like on the reference photo, you can just get your putty eraser, pull it into a bit of a point, and you can just take out some of that graphite, because the graphite is just sitting on the page, it's not actually in those indenting areas. So we've got the option to work back and forth in these areas. And I find that's one of the beauties of working with graphite. Especially compared to some of my other mediums like scratchboard, it's a little bit harder to sort of pick out and revert. You have to really be careful with your lights and your darks with scratchboard. And again, we're just aiming to cover this area, and then we're going to go back in and just redefine a few different things. Now, even with me sort of paying attention to the indenting length of the fur, I'm also paying close attention to the marks that I'm making with my pencils as well, because again, I don't want big long strokes in this area. I just want these sort of short dabbing motions. And again, it's just picking up the slightly raised paper that's not been indented. So I'm just going to start working on just darkening this area up slightly. I'm going to stick with my 2B pencil. I'm just going to press a little bit harder. Only a little bit, we're not going too hard here, because this is a very sort of, it's one of the brighter areas of fur that we've got. And like I say, I find it easier to darken things up than I do to lighten things back out again. So what we're going to do now, so I'm just having a look back at my reference photo. So I'll probably start continuing to work further up here. And just, not the camera there, sorry. And I'm just going to start working more over this area. So now that you've seen me do that ever so slight bit of texture just here, I'm going to speed it up and I'm just going to work over this whole area as a whole, and then I'll come back to you when I start working on a little bit more complicated texture. Right then guys, so we've managed to now finish sort of most of the bridge of the nose. We'll probably be coming back and forth to this throughout the whole piece, just as other elements come together. You'll realise certain areas may be too dark, other areas may be too light, so you just need to lighten and darken those up as you go. So we're going to now start looking at this slightly more, sort of slightly different fur direction areas, probably the best way, a little bit more confusing. So again, when you look at my line art anyway, you can see that I've got these slightly directional in lines, and then these ones come down and these ones go out. And like I say, these are just signifying to me that there's a lot of different fur changes in this area. Now, I've actually got two reference photos. My first one is the original reference photo, and then my other one is my line art that's been superimposed over that reference photo. So I can see when I look at my line art version where these lines correspond to on the actual reference photo itself. And that just again helps make sure I don't get lost in different areas. So I can see that the fur comes down here and then it curves out round this bottom area. So sometimes I'll come in from a few different areas and just help sort of bring these areas together. Now the fur here goes even shorter than what's on the bridge of the nose. It's almost just like little dots and little dabs. And again, that's just what we're going to try and replicate. We're just going to do really short little fur strokes. So it comes out and then it starts to come down and then it starts to fan round here. Now in the middle about here, it's hard to know which way the fur goes because it's so stubbly, it's almost just little strands of fur sort of coming at the viewer. So it's going to be hard to know there what's going on. So, but again, we're just going to try and do what we see in the reference photo. We're just going to do these little short dabbed strokes. And to stop us getting overwhelmed, we're only going to be working on a small section at a time. So I'm just going to be working on this area just here, because I don't want to get lost in my reference photo or where I am on my actual piece. Now, when you're doing the indenting technique, it can be a little bit difficult to actually see where your indenting lines are. So I've actually got another light. So I've got my main light that's sort of lighting my artwork, and then I've got a light just above that's sort of casting a little bit of a shadow down onto my artwork. And this just allows me to see, and hopefully you guys to see, the sort of shadow cast by the indent. Because until you go back over it, you're not going to know sort of where those marks are really. And by then it might be a little bit late. So we're just doing a few little dots, a few little dabs. Like I say, it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. We're just going for that general feel of the fur. And in this area, it's a very stubbly, confusing area of fur. So now that we've done that, we're going to go back in with our 2B pencil. Now generally, like I say, with these areas, I'll start with a 2B and then I'll just work my way up. Now because it is a darker area, you can already see on the reference photo, it's and with that G, I know it's going to be more of a greyed area in regards to its tone. And then this fur that's coming down here is a slightly brighter fur. So we're just going to work over this whole area. Now you've got a couple of different ways you can tackle an area that's a little bit more greyed or black. So obviously now you can see that with my indenting marks they're white, and that's because when I did my indenting I did it on a clean page, so there was no graphite on that page to begin with. Now when you're looking at the reference photo, there are some white hairs, but some of them are also a little bit more greyed, and then underneath looks a bit more darker, like getting closer to those really dark tones. So you've got a couple of different ways of tackling this. You can do it the way I've done it here, which is where we've indented on the white page, and then you go back in with your graphite and then try and darken up those fur strands, and I'll show you how to do that. Or you can darken the area first, maybe with a light layer of graphite powder, and then indent over the top of that. And what you'll then do is be pushing the graphite that's on the page down into the tooth of the paper when you're doing your indenting. So really it's up to you which way you want to go about it. So I'm going to get my makeup brush and I'm just going to soften out a little bit of this. Now what this will also do is it will help push some of that graphite that's on the page down into those indenting marks, and it will just soften those up and make them look a little bit darker. Now if you're going to do it the way I've done it and just put your indenting marks down first on a white bit of paper, on a clean bit of paper, I find using a mechanical pencil that's a bit sharper will just allow you to actually get into those grooves, but also it feels to me a little bit more controlled in where I'm putting things. And these are just those first layers. These aren't the darkest we're going to go in this area. I'm actually going to start moving and working down so I can work on this whole area. So it'll be just a little bit easier to do. So obviously we've got this sort of dark spot where the whiskers are going to come out of. And again, really pay close attention to that reference photo for these fur changes and these directional changes. And because of the angle of my light, it's just making it a little bit harder to see these indenting marks. I'm trying to, and I don't want to keep moving the light because it's going to be a little bit distracting. So I'm just making sure by re-going over certain areas again. And if you find that you put some graphite down and you haven't indented over that area and you wanted to, just go back in, just take it up with a Kneadable eraser or a normal eraser, lift that graphite back out, and then go back in and redent over. So we also need to make sure we're looking at the transition between the bridge of the nose and then this area. So this area is sort of closer to the viewer and then it sort of curves off and down, and that's what's giving it that shadow. So we want to make that transition nice and smooth. We don't want it to be like a harsh, stark line. And again, like I said, we're going to keep going back in and readjusting these and working to smooth things out. So we don't expect on this first layer and these first passes things to look amazing. Or I don't anyway. So as you can see, because we've done those indenting textures really stubbly, really close together, there's no real discernible direction to this fur. It's an area that's very wild and wiry. Say wiry, like stubbly, sorry. Obviously you can go as simple as you like with these sorts of things. You don't have to try and get every little detail in. It's really up to you when you feel like you want to stop and when you're happy, I probably have a habit of wanting to put too much detail into things. So judging, looking at the reference photo, where this black circle or this black area is here, if we go all the way across, just as it joins the bridge, it's a bit darker and it's going up in this sort of snaked pattern, and that's just where I'm going to try and darken things up. And again, here I'm using my mechanical pencil because I can just get into some of those indents. And again, I'm still being very light with these layers, that I'm not pushing down hard. I don't want to damage the tooth of the paper. And also I don't really want to burnish. So I'm just almost just letting things glide. And just because it is a sharper pencil, it naturally just also lays into those areas. And it's hard to tell how dark you'll need to go. So obviously at the minute we've only got the bridge of this nose in, and then this area and some of the nose. As we start working out towards everything else, this area and this area, things will need to change. We need to sort of understand that at this stage, because at the minute you could be working to try and perfect an area, but then as something changes and as you get more details into the piece, you realise things need adjusting, and you may be spending a long time trying to get something dark or an area really dark and smooth, but then once you get another area in, you may realise you've actually gone too dark. So just be aware of that and don't worry right now on these first layers about getting things perfect. And generally try and get everything up to a certain level of completion and then go from there. And then when I'm at the end of the piece or further on in the piece, I'll try and lift things out or brighten things up or darken things down. These areas are almost just mapping in the sort of main body, getting things up to sort of a good 80% completion. Right, so as you can see now, we've sort of tackled a little bit more of this complex area. The fur's coming down from the top, it's coming down from this side, it's curving around here, it's curving around this spot, it's going to come out over this side. So there's a lot of areas that we need to pay attention to, and they just take time. This isn't a type of piece that you can rush and get complete in a day, unless you make it smaller or you are working fast. Now, with my technique, I don't really feel like I can work that fast. It's just, it takes as long as it takes. I want things to be right. So I'm just outlining as the fur comes around this sort of cheek area. Now, if you look at this area on the reference photo, it looks a little bit softer. Now, I feel like these hair strokes are a little bit harsh, so I might just try and blend those in a little bit. And also use a bit of a blending stump, and that's just going to help push a bit more graphite down into these marks. And already it's just taken some of the starkness out of that mark. We've done most of the hard work with the indenting on these areas, so once you've got that fur indented, the actual going over with the pencils tends to go a lot quicker and a bit smoother. You already know that your marks are there, and it's just about sort of then looking at that tonal value and softness really. It looks a little bit darker on the video than what it does in real life. This is just my 4B now, so I'm just darkening a few different areas down. Now I'm just going to have a look at this area of black. So what I want to do, just for a little bit of added realism, I'm just going to pull some of those fur strokes over and into this area of blackness, because we don't want it just to look like a circle. It's going to just look a little bit odd, so we want to make it a little bit uneven. And sometimes just add a bit of interest. And these spots tend to be some of the darker areas of the piece, very similar to sort of just underneath the nostril of that nose. So when you're looking at your reference photo, try and look and see the different tones and where things match. So I know that looking at the reference photo that this area and this area are going to be very similar in their darkness. So if this is lighter, or the one at the bottom's lighter down the nose, one of them's going to need darkening. No, you don't have to do that now. That can be done later on, even at the end, if that's what you want to do. You can see just as I sort of darken these tips of the fur, just going over into them, just because I don't want them to be stark white. So I'm going to start continuing to work over the rest of this side of the upper part of this muzzle. Again, I'll swap to a time lapse, and then what I will probably do is once I've got this section complete, I'll come back to you and we'll start work on the other side. Right then guys, so you've just seen me complete the rest of this area on that time lapse. But what I wanted to do was focus a little bit more on this area because there's a few different fur directional changes. So this area is a little bit more complicated than what this area was, but it gives you a good idea in regards to the technique I've used, and we were sort of putting into practice the techniques we've talked about here and just doing it over a bit of a larger section. So you can see we've included some of the shadows where the nose just sort of dips off on this side. But this area is not quite complete yet. Like I said, it's probably about 70 to 80% complete. I need to go back in, really sort of establish these dark values and pull out some of the lights as well. But what I'll do is we'll wait for the majority of this piece to be complete before we look to do that. So we're going to start working, like I say, over on this area just here. Now, so that I don't muddy the area that we've just completed, because obviously it is on the opposite side of the page, I'm just going to put some glassine paper like I did before, just down, ended up ripping it, just down over this area so that I don't smudge anything that we've just done. So I'm going to start in a few different places at the same time, and I'll talk to you about why. So you can see on the reference photo the fur, bear with me, comes this area just here, we've got a W. Now when we're looking at the reference photo, we can work out what white stripe that is, which means this area here is the black area, and then this area is coming onto the face. Now it can get quite confusing which areas you're working on, because it's hard to know if this set of fur marks here and then here's black and here's white, or is it that bit's black and this bit's white. So it's actually over here that we're working on. So I'm going to start over at the top and just define out this area, because then the fur comes down and then it angles round to join the nose. So we're just going to put a few little fur strokes in just to begin with. So I hope you can see them just being picked up on camera. We're just mapping out, like we did here, the direction of that fur. And what I'll do is I'll work in a few different areas, like I say, on this part, because we need to sort of join everything together. So looking at this black marker here, most of this fur comes almost directly down towards it. So that's a good sort of landmark to work off. So we'll put some of that in, and it sort of splays off to this side and then off to this side. So it can be a little bit complicated, as like I say, this nose muzzle and the texture you normally get around this muzzle, it's probably the most complex texture you'll find on most animals. There will be some other areas that are a little bit more challenging depending on what animal you actually tackle in, but on most, let's say, big cats, probably with the exception of maybe the lion, because you've got that mane, this area tends to be one of the more challenging in regards to fur. So I hope you can see those being picked up on camera. Like I say, it's quite hard to show you these indented marks themselves because I have to have a light up here just trying to cast a shadow for you guys. So we'll sort of fill this in first. Now this, like I say, it's not meant to be perfect right now. We're just mapping in where things are going to be. So as this fur sort of comes, oh, got this all around. As the fur sort of comes and joins over here, it starts to come down. Now this is where, like I say, these fur marks that I've put in to begin with, they're really helpful. So sometimes when you're doing your line art, it's good not to rush that and really take your time. Because it really does help you in this long run. And again, we're just going to fill this area in a little bit just to give us a bit of a map. Now I don't do this with every area, as you saw when we were doing the time lapse over here. I don't always fill it in straight after doing it. If it's a fairly easy area for me to follow, I'll fill it a larger area of fur in, but if it's a little bit more complicated, I'll do this just to help me so that I don't get lost. Now again, similarly as on this side, this fur comes almost horizontal at this point. And again, don't forget to pay attention to your fur length. With these sort of initial strokes, you don't want to be going too long. So this sort of thing, a lot of this comes with practice, noticing these subtle changes in the fur direction. And probably the best thing I can recommend is getting a decent reference photo. You can do it and you can make it work with a reference photo that's slightly blurred, but it's a lot harder, and I would generally say if you can avoid it, get the best reference photo you can, because it's just going to make your life a lot easier. After you've done quite a few artworks, you'll start to realise the fur sort of tends to follow a very similar path with most animals in regards to areas such as this. Sort of similar areas would be like around the eye. I'm just going to move my glassine paper. So you'll start to understand, like I say, with most animals, the areas around the eye, the fur will generally tend to go in a similar direction. I'm just going to fill this area in as well. And just a very, very light shading over the top. And even when I'm doing these light shadings, I'm still mimicking the fur texture. So I'm still crossing my strokes over. I'm not just sort of shading over the top. And I find this, again, just helps add realism with this technique. You don't want to be just putting your indenting marks down and then just colouring over the top of them, because it just won't look natural. Okay. So I know that the fur now over here is fairly simple. It's just going to sort of come around and go down this way, but we still need to work a little bit more up here. So again, like I say, I'm just looking at my reference photo all the time, and I'm using the reference photo where my line art is superimposed over the top of it. Now this area is a lot darker, so it's a little bit harder to see. So we know that the fur comes out here, because we've already established that. So when it's a little bit more complicated like this, it's sometimes worth going to an area where you know the fur growth. So we know it comes down here, and then we're just going to almost work from the outer edges coming in. And I'd probably suggest, if you're going to do anything, try and keep your fur strokes really short in these sorts of areas, because if you do happen to get something slightly off, it's easier to adjust in that area. So again, just having a look at my reference photo. So in the middle, the fur is actually that short, and it's almost coming at the viewer, so it looks like just a little dot. So that's what we're going to try and replicate. Now obviously we've got our G here, so we can line that up with our reference photo and just judge where things are coming from. Now, a tip for this area is I probably wouldn't press too hard with your indenting, just because you don't want there to be a very, very thick line. And in fact, you can even change over. Now, you probably saw this when I was doing my time lapse. I've got another indenting tool. Now, this is just a dart that I've just blunted the end on, so it's not as sharp anymore, but it will give me a much thinner line. And I'll change indenting tools depending on the image or the size or the fur that I'm working on. So for this image, this area and the fur in this area is probably quite large, so that's why I'm using my other indenting tool. But for an area such as this, a smaller indenting tool is going to work really well. I'm almost using this G as a bit of a centre, and everything's sort of swirling out around it. Now we're not going to know if we've got this 100% right until we start layering our fur over the top of it. Well, sorry, our pencils over the top of it. So I think I'll just pause there and I will get my 2B pencil. Now instead of doing long fur strokes, I'm just going to dab, because again, we're just trying to replicate the fur that's in here. And it's not long strands of fur, it's these short, stubbly bits of fur texture. And we will need to soften all this down with some sort of blend, because they're a little bit bright at the minute. And then we're going to start moving up and out over this way. It's almost just like a bit of a wheel, so everything's sort of coming off around it. Then we're just going to go back over and you can just see how those white hairs are just standing out. So we're on the right track so far. So I'm going to swap back to my thicker indenting tool, just because the hair now is starting to get a little bit thicker as we move up here. Now I really like this indenting tool that I work with here. It's got, I think I said at the beginning, a lot of different nibs that you can use. So if you are doing an area that's got thicker fur, or even something like whiskers, you've got that thicker nib just to help. Now I know this technique probably feels like it takes double the amount of time as you're probably doing fur in a more traditional way, but I just really like the look it gives, so I don't mind. So we came up to the sort of edge of this bridge of the nose, and this is just where it then starts curving back down and into the sort of, what do we say, almost like the cheek area. let's just move our paper just so we can see. So like I said, we don't want to start coming too far over where this fur is meant to be quite bright. I think once we've completed this section just here, I think that's probably the more complicated fur complete. Everything else now has a fairly noticeable path and direction. This is the areas that I feel most people tend to have a little bit of a problem with or struggle with a little bit more. And I'm really looking forward to getting to work on this muzzle area. It's probably my favourite part. Just a shame I've got to leave it to the end. And we'll also be showing you later in these videos how I would do whiskers as well. So that's another troublesome area, I think. So I hope you're getting to understand a little bit more on how we tackle fur texture, because I think once you get the general gist, it really does just, especially for short fur, it really does just stay the same. And once I've got all this area blocked in, we'll just end up going back in and just establishing those darker values. We just show you the both sides just so that we can map things up a little bit. So you can see there how the right side is sort of a lot darker, so we've got all that tone in here, whereas on this left side that's still what we need to do. Last little area of this sort of initial tone that we're going to lay down. Okay, so I'm now just going to start going around and just darkening those values and re-establishing where I want certain things to be. So I'll probably just speed this area up just because you've seen a lot of this already, and I'll pick you back up just when we're starting to tackle some other areas. Right then guys, so now that we've got most of that fur texture in, pretty much got most of what I think we're going to get done in this episode. Obviously next episode we're going to start working down on this part of the face, but just before we do that, I just want to adjust some of the tones that we've got here. So obviously we've put in this sort of basic map now, so it's a little bit easier to judge where things are, where things need softening, and where we need to sort of boost that contrast a little bit. So I'm going to get my 6B pencil as well to help me with this. So we can see now this area over here is probably one of the darker areas. So we're just going to need to darken up these spots a little bit. And as you darken one area, you'll start to see other areas that then need adjusting, because a lot of your tones were built off the fact that you already had that tone in place. So we need to continuously adjust things. Most of this complex fur, like I say, is in now, but I think some of it's a little bit too bright still, so I may just have to soften that down, not just by going darker, but maybe just use my makeup brush. And what that's going to do is it's just going to help push some of those darker tones into the actual indenting marks that I've made. The more you do of this, like I say, the more areas will feel like they need adjusting. So now a lot of this area feels like it needs to go a bit darker. Now luckily we've already done all of our hard work by getting that fur texture in. This now is just sort of that tonal map that we're going to be following. And I want to get this right because obviously as we move further down, we're going to start encountering some very light fur. So I want these darks to be in place so that I can help judge that value really. And again, I'm not sharpening these Caran pencils, so this is blunt, or blunt to a degree, because I just want it to glide over the top. I just want it to sort of darken those areas between. If I want to darken the actual indented lines themselves, then that's when I need to either start blending with my blending stump or get my Staedtler pencils out and try and work into those indented grooves. Now, as you're trying to sort of blend over into this area, you want there to be almost like a gradual transition. You don't want it to be a harsh line, like let's say for here. So this area, let's say we want to make that softer. So I'll start darkening this area, but as I get closer to this area where I don't want there to be a stark line, I'll start spacing out how far apart I do my marks. And that just helps give that sort of soft transition into that area, because you really don't want on this side of the nose a really harsh line. Remember, as we adjust one thing, other things start to become apparent. So as we darken these up, some of the darker areas down here are also going to need darkening up. So it's this constant battle between lightening and darkening. If I just want something to be generally just a tone darker, you can just glaze with your pencils. So just hold it on its side and just lightly sort of shade over, and that will also help if you need to cover a larger area. And we'll probably still end up darkening this even further once we're near the end of the piece and we've got those other darker tones in, because obviously down here there's going to be some really dark tones coming up and under, and that's probably going to make these areas appear a bit brighter. So just be careful you don't work sort of too hard on these areas in regards to working so much to get those values down at the moment or darken those values at the minute that you either damage or flatten the tooth of the paper, because you still want to have the ability to go a bit darker if you need to. Now, one of the reasons why I chose this paper to work on, so this is the Strathmore Bristol Smooth, I think it is. It's not the vellum surface, it's the smooth from the 300 series. It's got a really white tone to it, so I find that compared to some of my other papers, so you'll see me use a variety of different ones depending on what I'm working on. So St. Cuthbert's Mill is another paper that I use. Now, I really like some of those other papers, but they're a slightly more off-white colour compared to this one, whereas this is more of a bright white colour. And I find that if I want something to have a lot of contrast, so things like tigers and these stripes and this particular muzzle, it just makes it, because it's white or bright white, it makes these tones stand out a bit better and just makes them a bit more contrasted. So you can see how I've darkened these stripes here, but now these ones need darkening. I'm still sort of leaving room for at the very end when I come over with that 9B or 8B pencil, so I don't want them to be completely filled up in regards to the tooth of this paper. So I'm getting fairly happy with this now. I'm just going to swap over onto my 4B. And then just add these final sort of touches onto this area. I don't quite like where I put my kneadable eraser, so I'm not quite happy with just those couple of lines there, so I'm just going to take some of those back out. I'm just going to lighten up some of these highlights. And at the very beginning, when you realise you actually haven't got any other tones on the page to judge these areas off, you think you've gone dark enough, and then all of a sudden you get an area in that's really dark, and it just makes you realise that you need to go back around. And like I say, these areas will be readjusted once we get some of the values in as well. So don't worry too much at this stage if you're not 100% happy. Just soften those marks out a little bit there. Okay, I think I'm going to call that one there. Now I say this and then I see something, so I might just soften that out a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to leave that one as it is for now. So obviously we've covered a lot of different fur textures throughout this video. I have had to speed up a few different areas just because otherwise this video would be 2 or 3 hours long. So I hope you've managed to pick up a few tips and tricks on that area. Like I say, it is one of the more complex areas of fur that you're going to encounter. There's so many different fur direction changes, so it is complicated, but once you get your head around how things lay, it is a little bit easier, and I hope this has helped. So in part 3 we're going to start working on this muzzle area. So there's going to be a lot of contrast in this area, a lot of bright whites and a lot of really dark blacks, and I hope it's just going to bring all the rest of this piece together. So I hope you've enjoyed this one. Let me know in the comments if you've tried it, if you want to learn anything else, or what you're enjoying on my channel, or what you want to see going forward. So like I say, I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you all again in the next one.